points we were trying to get across here. Is there anything burning that either of you wanted to talk about that we haven't gotten to yet?
It was one, this is more the kind of technical, not the technical, but another reason why I think science didn't kind of survive and succeed in the ancient world was because Rome and Greece, they were basically, and I'm talking about about technology more than science, they were slave economies. And it's like, why invent a water wheel when you just get 50 slaves to do it for you? And it's easy to overlook because you look at the Middle Ages and think, well, they were free, but they were serfs and life was miserable. But still, the serf had his own property. There were certain things they were free to do.
Some serfs became wealthy.
Became wealthy, right. So there was the kind of impetus there.
Serfs up.
Right.
And then
But there was
plagues, and suddenly labor was short.
Right.
But you can see there would be an impetus there for even common people who had to do rather, a lot of drudgery to think there's got to be an easier way to maybe automate this if possible, whether it's a spindle for the women who are making the thread or, the water wheel to generate.
And
Rotary motion is unnatural in the medieval sense. It's sort of like lights going out.
The theater. The show starts in 5 minutes.
Natural simply meant according to the nature of the thing. Like
The inner principle.
you can be naturally strong, or you can be strong through exercise and working out. In which case you are unnaturally strong because it's not by nature, by birth, natus. Okay. So rotary motion is unnatural because most people, they'll move their arms like this or like this, but moving it like this or like this doesn't come easily. Rotary motion was invented one time in Tibet to turn prayer wheels. It was then adapted, still in Tibet, to hand kerns to grind grain. The grain was put in a bowl, and a round capstone was placed in the bowl, and it had a handle, and you went like this, grind, 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 and the flour came out the little chute. It crossed all of Eurasia, from China through the Middle East into Europe, and never did anything else but be a hand kern. As soon as it hit Europe, they invented camshafts and crankshafts, and they put them on water wheels, so the wheel going around like this would make hammers go up and down like that,
hammers,
and saws go back and forth like that. The medieval industrial revolution.
And they wasted half the forests in Europe.
Details.
That's why they had global warming back then.
And, question here.
I kind of understanding, I think, from your discussion of going into the Renaissance, and I kind of have a rough understanding of what happens in the Renaissance. I'm kind of interested in what happens after the Renaissance, with Newton.
That's a whole different panel.
The rise of modern science.
What happens, one of the things that happens during that era, during the so-called Enlightenment, is Newton was so successful, just as Aristotle had been so successful, that everybody tried to imitate what he had done. We see that to this day with a lot of other sciences and other fields attempting to be Newtonian. I remember when I was teaching at Lafayette College, and at the same time that the physicists would describe the elegance of this equation, my art students were saying, well, the function of this part of the painting is to give leverage to the mass that's over in that part of the painting. You still want to go back to this very successful way of looking at the universe, which became very narrowing. And the worst thing that happened was that the theologians fell into this trap. And they wanted to use Newtonian physics as a way of proving God. As a result...
That's like looking for Shakespeare in the cast of characters of Hamlet.
Essentially. Well, it's much worse than that, yeah. Because once you couldn't use Newton's laws to prove God, the easiest way is, here's the part that Newton's laws doesn't explain, that must be where God is. And as the gaps get closed, then you run out of God. But at the same time, you're suddenly becoming much more narrow in your understanding of what a human being is, and the people who rebel against this in the arts, we lead to this redevelopment of the two cultures, who now never talk to each other. The artistic culture, the humanistic culture, and the end culture of the scientists and engineers. Reunited, of course, finally by Hugo Gernsback. Was there one other big point that you wanted to bring up.
No, in answer to that question, my personal theory is the Black Death was really a bad thing.
Yeah, you're going out on the limb on that one.
people would have.
Yeah, let me go out on a limb here. For the following reason. In the 14th century, people like Buridan and especially his pupil, Nicol Oresme, were doing really exciting stuff. Oresme proved the mean speed theorem in physics using mathematics. That was the first time anybody had used mathematics in physics. And no, I'm not forgetting about astronomy. That was a branch of mathematics. It was not considered a branch of physics yet. He proved a theorem using math. Wow! Oresme was also the guy who invented the plus sign. It was an abbreviation for et, meaning and. He just wrote the T. Because when you're doing all your manuscripts by hand, you don't have to spell everything out if you don't have to, right? So he invented the plus sign. Now that's the clue. One of the things they didn't have was good mathematical notation. They couldn't talk math easily.
The decimal point wasn't developed until around 1600.
Yeah. So that was one that they're piling up here, and then the Black Death comes along, kills like a third of Europe, kills Bradwardine, one of the greatest of the natural philosophers, killed Billy Ockham, another not a natural philosopher but a well-known philosopher. And it was not until the 16th, 17th century that population in Europe recovered to the level it had been in the 14th century. So one of my answers is it wasn't until then that there were enough natural philosophers again to reach a critical mass in exchanging ideas and thoughts. Along the way, Newton's greatest contribution was not his theory of gravity, which is wrong. It works okay as long as you're not going too fast. But his great contribution was to calculus. It was the first time there was ever a mathematics for things that were changing. Previously, it was arithmetic and geometry. That was it. How much physics can you do with that? Not much.
There was one other.
And then the other one is the deliberately contrived, designed experiment. So those are the two biggies, in my opinion.
There was one other